Hi, welcome to the second part of chapter 1. Today we're going to talk about a little bit of the history and the highway legislation related to our transportation systems in the US. Let's start first with the National Pike and what happened before and after 1800s. Before the 1800s, there were little to nothing when it comes to roadways. Basically, there was a very minimal amount of trails that they were cleared through the wilderness, and few roadways were built actually by fewer uh, by by private owners. And if you want to really go through those roadways, you have to pay a fee to literally swivel the pike to allow travelers to move. But in 1811, the construction of the first national road under the supervision of the federal government started, and they called the entire project as the National Pike. The project included about 800 miles worth of roadway, and it started from Cumberland, Maryland, all the way to Vandalia in Illinois. It was completed in 1852, and the total budget it was 6.8 millions. 6.8 millions in 1852, and I'll let you do the math to know how much that cost us using our today's dollars. And this part of this 800 miles became a big major part of the US Route 40 that's still used until nowadays. Um, then after starting the project, in the middle of the project, there was a lot of debate who should do what and who should be responsible for what, and the fight was apparently between the states as well as the federal government. So after 1832 Supreme Court, there was a big Supreme Court, and from that time there was some debates as well as some resolutions to know who is responsible to do what. So, for example, the federal government asserts the overall control of the highway through the power of purse strings. We know that again, the federal government are the major source of funding when it comes to um, um, building new roadways. So the federal government typically provide again the massive funding for uh, both construction, maintenance, as well as the operation of those highways. While the states are not required per se to follow these federal mandates and standards unless if they wanna qualify for federal government funding, then they have to follow those mandates and standards. So based on the Supreme Court resolution, they defined what's the federal role and what's the state role when it comes to building and maintaining highway facility. So let's start with the federal role. The federal role defined that the federal government is responsible for highway systems on federally owned land, such as national parks. So national parks, the state even does not construct it, does not maintain it. It's all about being built, maintained, designed 100% by the federal government. The federal government also has another role to provide a provision of funding assistance in accord with current federal state legislation. And they are also responsible of the development of planning, design, standards, as well as guidelines that must be followed by every single state that, especially if they want to qualify for federal aid funds. They're also required to monitor and enforce compliance with federal standards as well as criteria in order to use those federal aid funds. How about the states? The state role, they are responsible for administration, their own highway systems. They're responsible for planning, designing, constructing, maintaining highway systems according to the federal standards. And also they have the right to delegate responsibilities to local roadway systems, um, such as counties and cities. For example, we are in a big state, and TxDOT will handle that many roadways, the major roadways, but they also delegate some roadways to the city. If we have cities within the city limits, that's the city where to maintain and build and take care of. If there are also some cities, some roadways within a county, but it's between two cities, that's the county. So the state has the role to delegate those responsibilities to cities and councils and local governments to take care of. And since then, since 1932, there has been several federal aid highway acts developed from 1916 all the way till 2005. Another system that also started in the 50s of last century was the National System of Interstate and Defense Highways. The interstate system that we have in the US here is the largest public works project in the history of humankind, and I'll let you know why toward the end of this slide. This project, it was authorized in 1944, and it took about 11 years to be implemented, and that was in 1956. The entire length of the whole project along from coast to coast, south to north, it's about 42,500 miles that constitute, again, the national system. It's a multi-line and limited access facility, which means multi-line, you have to have minimum 2 lanes per direction, like the I-20 that we have here north of the city of Tyler. And it has to be a limited access facility, which means not every single vehicle can enter to the interstate easily. They have to have an on and off ramps to make sure that we're going to have a free flow speed. It's going to have a high level of service sort of facility. This interstate system also has to connect any metropolitan area that has a population of 50,000 people or more. That's why in Tyler we're way above that, and that's why we're served by the I-20, which sits right north of the city. Where does this money come from to build all this? It came 90% of it, 90% of the cost of this project came from federal government, since it has one condition. To build that interstate in any single state, the state has to agree that this interstate system can be used by the federal government for military purposes in the wartime. So this is the only condition that the state, or one of the conditions that the state has to agree on to get federal aid. And by 1994, which is about 45, 50 years, we reached that the system is 99.4% complete. And the reason why, again, they never say it's 100%, because by the time we're completing the latest part, the older sections were needing some rehabilitation. So we will never reach 100%. But again, by 1994, we reached almost the completion of the project. And the total cost of this project was $125 billion. And that's why I'm going to refer back to the first of at the beginning of this slide. That's why it's the most and the largest public work project in human mankind to cost that much money. So, since it's a very expensive system, what are some of the key characteristics of this interstate system that really doesn't change by going from one state to the other? First thing is we have to have at least 2 lanes per direction. Second, we have to have a full control of access. That means, again, it's control. You can't just, again, get to anywhere. There's on and off ramps. Typically, they are very well spread depending on if you are in a rural or urban environment. It's a closed loop system. That means all interstate begin as well as it ends at a junction with another interstate. Also, if you notice the north-south interstate system, it has an odd 2-digit number like I-95, while the east-west interstates, they are even 2-digit numbers like I-20. And even if there is an interstate that's served by a bypass loops, like for example in the Dallas area, the 635, that loop, it has to be a 3-digit number, and the last 2 digits indicate the primary route. For example, again, the 635, 35, that's because it's connecting the I-35, which is the major interstate system. Shifting gears now to another topic, what are the major elements of traffic engineering? In this course, we're going to be covering the first 4 highlighted in blue, and we're going to leave the other 3 to another course that we typically offer later on. And we're going to concentrate on traffic studies and characteristics. We're going to concentrate on performance evaluation, facility design, as well as traffic control. So in a brief couple minutes here about what are each one of those elements that we're going to cover. For the first one is the traffic studies and characteristics, which is we're going to spend quite a bit of time for the first 1/3 of the class, including the labs, to cover, which is basically we're going to try to do as much as we can when it comes to measuring as well as quantifying various aspects of highway traffic. And that can be done by data collection and analysis of traffic flow, including traffic volume, demand, travel time, traffic delay, as well as accident studies. Then we're gonna try to touch upon a little bit of the performance evaluation, which we already started in 3351, talking about the level of service, which is actually the methodology to rate the operating characteristics of an individual section of a facility. Then we're gonna have a facility design. Facility design is basically a functional as well as the geometric design. And then we are gonna finish up with the traffic control, which is also gonna take up a good portion of the class, which has to do with estimating and the establishment of traffic regulations, such as signs, markings, as well as signals. So this is almost getting done with the first semester, but with the first chapter, I mean, and this will lead us to the first homework. The first homework deals with one of the most modern problems or challenges, if you will, that faces traffic engineers. The first one is growth management. Again, we all know most of the time growing in general, that's a good thing. And to have a city that's growing, and we need to add up more traffic facilities, and therefore more businesses will be willing to open up, and more people will be willing to move in and live. That's a good growth because it's gonna bring again good things and prosperity to the city and the community. Everything is prosperous, again, everyone will be happy. But if we do not manage it, that growth can be, I don't want to say it, but that's what it is. It can be a cancerous growth. It can be out of control type of growth. So the best way is actually to always think of how can we manage the growth? How can we plan for such growth? So when we have it, again, it's planned, it's not a chaos. So that's one of the modern problems that we typically face. How can we manage the growth? Second is the reconstruction of an existing major highways. As I said, the interstate system was pretty much completed by 1994, and I do not see it happening in the next century or so to come up with a replacement for that system because it just costs too much. Instead, we're going to end up doing multiple rehabilitation, maintaining the system, and in some cases, we're going to end up doing some reconstruction of an existing small portions of that major highway. So what I want you to do is to pick one of these two topics, talk about it in an essay format for 2 pages, and the due date, of course, is on Canvas. I'll refer you to that. And please put the 3rd page for references. Do not just use essays on top of the internet. Make use of Google Scholars, published journals, published papers that you can trust and you can cite at the end of the homework. Couple more things before we finalize this chapter is what are the standards and references that we typically use as traffic engineers. There are multiple. The top on the top of the list, as you could see, is the Traffic Engineering by Rowers. This is our textbook. Our textbook is very well known around the world. It's a good source. I highly encourage you to get it and keep it as a good source, especially if you see yourself as a future traffic engineer in particular. We also have the Traffic Engineering Manual, and it's the 6th edition, I believe. And then we have the manual on uniform traffic control devices. We have, which we call the MUTCD. We have also the HCM. This is the Highway Capacity Manual. We have the Ash to Green book, which is basically the policy on geometric design of highways and streets. We have the Traffic Signal Timing Manual, as well as the Transportation Planning Handbook, Trip Generation, and Parking Generation. So you could see that every reference is tailored to handle one aspect of the tasks that the traffic engineer handle on a daily basis. So I encourage you again to look them up on the internet. Most of them are available. So just create a folder and have them for the sake of this class and beyond. Last slide here before I let you go is the units. I know in so many, if not all the subdisciplines in civil engineering, they already moved from the US units to the metric international units. That's not the case in transportation and traffic engineering. Despite the several attempts by the federal government to switch to metric units in the US, most states, state DOTs in particular, they still use English units in design and control of any traffic engineering aspects. So it's the US units that will be used for this class and beyond if you are a traffic and transportation engineers. With this, again, we finished chapter 1. I will see you in the next chapter. Bye bye.